This is your spiritual game plan, and I'm your host, Sherry Fletcher. Change. It happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years. Then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but the dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids, and now they've moved on, but your empty nest is filled with parent care. Maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is the show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Through interviews and inspirational guests, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God placed in you, develop a game plan for your life's calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. Today, I will be talking with Shannon Popkin, author of Comparison Girl, Lessons from Jesus on Me-Free Living in a Measure Up World. Shannon is a writer, speaker, and Bible teacher who loves pointing others to the truth of God's Word. She combines her gifts for humor and storytelling with her passion for Jesus. In her book, Shannon invites women to leave measure up comparison behind and connect with those around them by choosing Jesus's me-free way of living. It's a real chance to break free from the shackles of comparison. Thank you for joining us for episode 108 with guest Shannon Popkin. Shannon, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you, Sherry.
This is exciting. Before we dive into our topic, I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and then some of the earliest memories you have with struggling with comparison.
Sure. I live in Michigan. I was born in Indiana, but raised in Michigan, and have lived here with my husband for about 15 years now. And we've got 3 kids. We have one that just launched from college. So yay, we have one launched. And then we have one who is still in college and one who's still in high school. So, and I do love speaking and writing. My hope is to invite women in particular to live like God's word is true. Sometimes we say things that we believe are true, but we live in a way that shows we don't really believe what we're saying. So my hope is just to invite us to live out the truth with our lives. So you asked earliest memory of comparison. You know, recently I asked my cousin, who's about 10 years older than me, what do you remember me being like as a little kid? And the first word out of her mouth was confident. You know, I was just completely confident. I would walk into a room and just make my demands, and I didn't care what anyone thought of me as a little kid. And then, man, all of that confidence just evaporated at about 6th grade. I remember there just being this turning point. And you know, before 6th grade camp, I was this giggly girl. I had a best friend named Kathy, and we would do sleepovers and play with our little Mad Libs books and write past notes in class. And we just were having a great time in life. And then we went to 6th grade camp, and Kath was in a different cabin. And I was in this cabin with all of these girls who were like really cute and popular, it seemed. And they were, you know, they were talking about the boys, and I was pretty sure the boys were talking about them. And I remember just one girl in particular, her name is Kim, and she's given me permission. She was just the cutest little girl. I mean, like I remember dark, thick lashes and this curly blonde hair and the cutest like smile, and she had little dimples, and I just thought, oh my word, she was adorable. And she just had a cute, shy personality, but everyone was kind of drawn to her. So I remember watching her and her friends over in the corner in the cabin at camp, and just how like I just felt like, oh my goodness, like they totally understand the code and I am lost here. Right. But there was one thing that I was watching at night. Kim rolled, she had her hair was damp. She'd taken a shower and she rolled her hair up in these pink sponge rollers. And I was like, I had never, did you wear
yes,
those?
I totally remember those.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
So this was my first time being exposed to these. So I was watching very intently, and the next morning she woke up and she pulled them out and her hair was like these big, beautiful, bouncy curls. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is the secret to the enviable beauty of my dear sweet friend Kim. And so I went home and I tried those. I had my mom get me some pink sponge rollers and I did it just like I had seen Kim do it. Now my hair was a lot shorter and a lot thinner and finer like it is now. and I I went to bed with those rolled up in my hair, and I ran to the mirror the next morning and pulled them out, and I like looked as though I had been electrocuted. It was not the enviable beauty that I was hoping for. And so I just remember that being this turning point, where I went from confident and happy-go-lucky and just having a blast with my best friend to like looking around and realizing like, oh my goodness, like there are all of these ways that we're being measured and I think I don't measure up. And so just kind of feeling like sick to my stomach, inadequate after that. And yeah, I think that is a really hard time in a girl's life. Sherry, I don't know if you have any experiences from your middle-aged years. Yeah.
Absolutely. I do some work in middle-aged schools, or middle. Yeah. And sixth grade, and even sixth grade's the hardest. And even with my own kids, looking back elementary school, sixth grade was a huge turning point in so many different ways. Yeah. It is. So I want to have a fun comparison question for you then. Okay. Compare what is your preference, a phone call or a text?
Well, I would mostly say phone call. Texting is necessary once in a while, but I feel like a phone call, you're really connecting, and you feel like you've had a chance to hear each other's voice. Now, I do really like the hybrid version, which is Voxer. Do you use Voxer?
Yes.
So I really enjoy that. I have, probably my closer friends, we use Voxer and just kind of keep up that way. So I do love to hear somebody's voice. I feel like there's more connection in that.
Absolutely. One question that I like to ask everyone that I speak with is, looking back in your life, how far back can you see the very purpose that you're living out today in who you've always been?
Well, my mom has this memory of seeing me on the front porch at our little house, and I had gathered all of the kids from the neighborhood, and they were kind of my little audience there, and I was telling them about heaven and about hell, and I was speaking very forcefully, and my little 2 or 3-year-old sister was in the audience, and my mom was like, oh no, because I was terrorizing her. But I was like just passionate about getting the truth out and letting people know, and again, confident, right? And so yeah, I mean, I do see that I still love to communicate, and getting the truth out is really important to me. And yeah, gathering groups. So I do see that in my purpose. There's another little thing that I remembered. If you were to ask me in college what my favorite class was, it was literature of the Bible. And I remember writing a paper, and it was all about like just the genres and looking at the Bible from just the literary aspects. And I still really enjoy looking at the Bible that way. And that's really, I went to school to be a teacher, and I do still kind of do teaching, but just I can see back then that there was a spark in understanding the Bible and seeing the literary aspect of it.
I love that. What I heard from you was when you really leaned into your conviction, you had no problem with your confidence.
Yeah.
And being like Kim was not a conviction. So of course
Right.
you'd have no confidence in that.
Right.
And
That's
so
true.
I love looking back and seeing, you know, people seeing where God placed this passion in them from the beginning and how he's led them. So we're talking about your book today, which is awesome. It is Comparison Girl. And lessons from Jesus on me-free living in a measure up world. That is so packed full of just so much we could do with that. So we will only get to a few of the wonderful things you've taught us in this. So I would love it to tell my listeners to go ahead and get the book for a deeper study, because there's so many twists and turns in here that are so wonderful. But the concept of the measuring cup, I love that. When I thought about measuring up, I went back and looked at some areas of my childhood, and the first one that came to my mind was when my mom would line us up against the wall and make us stand there and measure us against the wall. And here's a visual proof every day when you walk by that wall of where you don't measure up.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't, you know, it was just for fun and growth. But I remember, because I'm the oldest, and I have a sister in the middle and then a little brother. And I remember watching him start to pass me and getting mad because I couldn't control it, but he sure loved to gloat. And then, you know, here he is, the baby of the house, walking around like how tall he is over us. And I just remember being so mad about that. And I'm thinking, well, that just set us up. That kind of set me up for measuring, because I still do. And so how does measuring up and proving ourselves to others, you know, how is the effect of that on us?
Well, right. I mean, so many of the things that we're jealous about and frustrated with, they're things that we can't control, right?
Yeah.
And really, this book was born out of, you know, often when we write a book, it's like then we're really drawn to one part of it, and then we want to write another book, and that's kind of how it was for me with Control Girl. Was the first book that I wrote, and the chapter I studied 7 controlling women in the Bible, and 2 of my chapters were Leah and Rachel. And I was just looking at their relationship, and really it was driven by the things that they couldn't control. Rachel could not have children. Leah could. Leah could not get her husband to love her, and Rachel could. And so they were both living out of what they didn't have and what they wanted so desperately, the things that they couldn't control, and they were comparing themselves. And that's really what led me to this study. And the verses that just captured my heart were in James. Just the severity of these verses about James is talking about, if you have like this desire, jealousy, or selfish ambition, this is not rooted in the wisdom that comes from above, but is earthly and unspiritual and demonic. So there is just this clear tie between us measuring ourselves and always wanting what the other person has, or always trying to prove that we have what they don't have. And that is our enemy's design for us, and we can just see how he can destroy. And I love how you put that when I was living out of my conviction, I had the confidence I needed, but yeah, he wants to destroy that confidence. He wants to back us into a corner where we feel intimidated, or puff us up in pride, so that we're, you know, like if you know anyone who thinks that they're better than everyone else, like you can see how their purpose also is distorted in life. And Jesus invites us to, instead of focus on ourselves, to pour out what we've been given.
I love that. And, you know, when you were talking about your conviction, one of the words that I talk about with my youth group is there is absolutely no such thing as self-confidence. Self-confidence is, like you said, we need to be me-free living, and self-confidence kind of an oxymoron, because we're told not to lean on our own understanding. And I don't have confidence in myself. There's days I don't even like myself. And so that can lead me then to thinking about perfectionism. Like when I'm measuring and trying to compare, I'm wanting to not only do like you, I want it to be better. And so how has perfectionism and trying to measure up affected in your life?
Yeah. They say that your first childhood memory says something about you, because it's so deeply ingrained in your memory. And mine is this memory of this woman in church who was sitting behind me, leaning down and taking my hymn book and turning it right side up. So apparently I was holding it upside down and I was singing confidently with all of my heart, and she flips it and I was mad at her. I was like, how dare she expose me before all of the watching world, expose me. I think I was about 4 years old, So I took my hymn book and flipped it the other way as if like, this is the way I like to hold my hymn book. Thank you very much, And it's just this, like, there's this driven part of me that wants the whole world to think that I have no flaws. I wouldn't, even at 4 years old, I'm embarrassed that anyone would think that I can't read, right? and that has not led to new confidence and joy and just peace. It's led to all of the opposite, just too much focus on myself. That drive to prove that I'm perfect, that I measure up in all areas of life, it just holds me back. It keeps me from just the freedom that Jesus wants me to have.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so speaking of that freedom, I want you to tell my audience why the measuring cup. I'm a visual person, and so just seeing that was so profound, and it's such an impactful visual and metaphor. I want to hear the meaning behind the measuring cup and then the concept of the line or the spout.
Yep. So I had the book cover here, and there's a measuring cup. You'll see it's and it's one of those glass Pyrex kind with the lines on the side, but the measuring cup is pouring out. And so that imagery, that metaphor came from Philippians 2, which says that Jesus emptied himself. It says, do nothing. This is Paul's instructions to us as believers. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you not look to his own interests, but to the interests of others, and have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. So see that equality, that's like a measure up word. Like Jesus's ambition was not to enter our world proving that he measured up, but Jesus emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. And so if we were to think of the measuring cup as the metaphor, our enemy wants us to always be focusing on the lines and looking at somebody else's cup and asking, like, do I have more in my cup, or does she have more? And either filling with pride or inadequacy based on how I measure up, always focused on the lines. But Jesus came as our example of focusing on the spout and emptying himself and pouring his life out and, looking to others, not even playing the comparison game, if you will. He wasn't about proving that he was equal to God. He got on his knees and washed the disciples' feet. He humbled himself. He took the role of a servant and went to the cross. That was the most extreme example of humility that the world has ever known, that the God of the universe who created us would become a baby and would die, grow to be a man and live a perfect life and then die in our place, for our sin. That was extreme humility. And when we live that life that Jesus invites us to, like, picture the measuring cup and it's tipped to the side, like on the cover. The lines, I mean, they don't mean anything anymore. They're irrelevant. And so when we're focused on other people, our focus is on the spout and pouring ourselves out, it frees us from living by the lines. The world is always going to turn our attention back to the lines and ask, how do you measure up? Our enemy is always going to focus us back on, either the pride that we do measure up or the inadequacy that we don't, because it completely distracts us from Jesus's purpose. Jesus will always invite us, on the other hand, to live by the spout and to pour ourselves out and to live in humility, putting others first. Like Philippians 2 said, do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility, consider others more important.
That's so powerful. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in the first part of your book, you share a story about a girl named Kate. And I really related to Kate because the differences that she had were determined by the peers and those around her to be ugly. And that was one of the things when I was in elementary school that I was constantly told I was ugly and dumb, and anything that made, things that I did that were different, then it got chalked up to being stupid or, not normal, but childhood stuff. And I related to her so well because those voices, will still sometimes come to the forefront of my mind when I'm about to do something. Well, don't do that because you're stupid, or, but God, Satan loves to do that, loves to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that the enemy loves to use the very difference that God gave us to divide us. Because if he can keep us from really appreciating and enjoying these gifts, and he wins. And I love how you break down 1 Corinthians 12 and show us this upside down way that God actually wants us to compare. And so how does grasping this concept of the upside down help us live out the calling and the plans that God gave us? And why is it that Satan wants us to not live those things out?
Right. Well, first off, Sherry, I'm just so sorry for the pain that you experienced as a child. That's crushing. And you are a beautiful woman created in God's image. And same with Kate, who I talked about in the book. She is this beautiful African-American woman, and she just had different hair than the rest of the kids in her class because they were Caucasian. So of course she had different hair. She had different parents than they did. And she's beautiful hair. She's a beautiful woman, and so are you. But we're created with differences. And that's by design. God likes differences. If there's one thing that we could notice about God in creation is that he loves variety. And so when he calls us to his church, it's not that we would be uniform. We see that in the gifts. First of all, the church is made up of people who are diverse ethnically, diverse economically, diverse, the church is global. Every nation, every type of person, every subgroup that you can think of, there is a representation in the church. But when we think about the body of Christ, the metaphor is one body, but many different purposes in the body. So let me just read from 1 Corinthians 12, the verses you were mentioning. It says, now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of service, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So you see that difference of variety, same. It would be a wrong conclusion then to say, after reading those verses, variety, same, well, let's just not think about the differences, right? Just stop comparing. Just don't notice that there are any differences. No, the point is that we're all different, and we have a variety of gifts. We have a variety of ways that we're called to serve, and the point is that we are different, and that's on purpose, and that is good. And so if you can kind of use that metaphor of the measuring cup and picture a room full of people where they're all standing there with their little measuring cup and holding it and looking at the lines and wondering side to side, glancing side to side, do I measure up? And then they all kind of are posturing, or they're, protecting themselves, trying to, I don't want to get too close to anybody because I don't want them to see that I don't measure up. Reverse that though, and they're all looking at the spout and saying, you know what, I have something in my measuring cup that is unique here. I have something to give everyone in this room, and they have something to give me. We all have something different in our measuring cups. And so then you picture the room where everyone is coming together, tipping their measuring cup and pouring into each other. And the group kind of clusters together where we're all pouring, receiving. And that is by God's design. If we can create this kind of culture in the church where differences are welcomed, we sort of give each other a place to belong, and we protect ourselves from the enemy. Because when you're in a place where you feel the warmth of belonging, and you know that you have a calling and a purpose, and you come with, just can't wait to get in that room and share what you've been given to everyone else, and can't wait to receive what they have for you, like that is, we're just not at risk of being exposed to the enemy's lies of you don't belong here, and you have no purpose, and you don't measure up. We have like this safe zone that we can create. Love that.
Yeah, that is powerful. And one of the things that Satan loves to do, Satan's at church every week too. He's there, and he does the most damage, but yet he doesn't get any blame, because people get hurt at church and then they leave God. And Satan's like, yeah, that's what I wanted.
That is so true. Yeah. I mean, if we think of Satan as like, his barrier is the church door, well, think again. That's where he does some of his greatest work. And he does it by tempting us to compare with each other, and either feel like, oh, I'm a worse sinner than them, or I'm more important here than they are, or all of those things. And the divisiveness, oh my goodness, it hurts the church, and it hurts the whole world, because we were meant to bless the world.
Yeah, especially when he shows up and like interrupts the sweet little girl's worship by turning her book upside down.
Exactly.
He stopped her worship.
Exactly. I was singing my heart out, man.
Look what happened. We live in this culture. I mean, your message is so countercultural. We live in this world where people say, I just want to be happy. And they're constantly, they're basing their goal on an emotion, and our emotions are like this. You really can't make happiness a goal if it's an emotion, but they're constantly looking for what's going to feed me. How am I going to be happy? And here you're saying this is a me-free living. And yet the me-free living is actually what makes us happy. So how does a me-free outlook give our differences and our calling a new meaning?
Right. Well, yeah, you're exactly right. In the world, the focus is all on us. You're enough, you're beautiful, you're, fill in the blank. And I think that those messages are in response to the cravings of our heart. And you know what? In Christ, we do belong, and we are loved, and all of our inadequacies are, he makes up for any lack that we have. But going back to like, what is that craving? There's this self-focus, and we're so drained by our sense of worthlessness and sense of inadequacy, and we want someone to tell us like, no, you're beautiful, you're enough, you're all those things. And I think what we're doing is we're trying to solve a problem of self-focus with more self-focus. And it's really just exacerbating the problem. Tim Keller says that the freedom of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself or less of myself. It's just thinking of myself less, right? And so he talks about the freedom of self-forgetfulness. And that is where I find the freedom, is just like, whenever I am starting to obsess about how do I measure up, and what are they thinking of me, and how did I look, and how did I sound, and really the best question to ask is usually, wait, maybe am I just thinking too much about myself? Am I just a little too self-focused? I recently wasn't asked to speak somewhere. There was a speaking opportunity, and I was not chosen. And so the temptation afterward was like, well, okay, I like have to like buoy my self-worth and say like, oh, okay, but think about all the ways, Shannon, God is using you, and you have been used in the past, and all, just all of these like, and like looking for compliments, going back and reading nice things that people have said about me. Well, that's just trying to solve this problem of self-focus with more self-focus, and it's just more attention on myself, and it does not solve the problem. And so here's what helped me is to ask, you know what? Yeah, I wasn't asked to serve in that way. I wasn't invited to speak at that event. However, I don't have any less opportunities to serve the Lord, right? Let me look around. Who needs me today? How can I serve someone? And there is not this hierarchy of service in the kingdom of God. We all have equal opportunity to serve the Lord. And that is really what frees us, is getting our eyes off of ourselves and asking, you know what, maybe God has opened my calendar for a new service opportunity, that this person who is asked to speak where I perhaps wanted to speak, they wouldn't be available the way that I'm going to be available. So we find more freedom, not in focusing on ourselves and trying to buoy our self-worth when we're feeling less than, but instead like getting our eyes really off ourselves. There's this me-free focus of Jesus that gives us freedom and confidence and new joy.
Love that. So we've kind of been talking about some of the bad parts about comparison, but are there any positive things that can come out of comparing?
Well, I think there's a reason that we say, just stop comparing, because it's just this tender area. Like, think of me at 6th grade camp and looking at those girls and feeling like, oh, I'll never be like them. Like, it hurts so much. There's so much pain wrapped up in comparing the wrong way, with the focus always on me and wanting to measure up. It's like this inflated ego and the desire to be the standout. Whenever I feel less than, it's really just the desire to be more than, right? When it hurts, it's just because I want to be the one that everyone's eyes are on, or I want to be the one admired. But what if we approached comparison rather than having the focus on ourselves? What if we approached it with me-free humility? What if, we entered a room of people saying, like, I'm not here to prove myself. I'm not here to prove that I have more, or that I am more. I'm just here to share what's in my measuring cup, like what God has given me. That's when I find that I'm most free to be me, like not posturing, not self-protecting, but just, saying, look, I have unique gifts. I have a unique background. I have a unique sphere of influence. And what is God calling me to do that's different than her? Now, in order to determine that, I have to compare, right? Mm-hmm. And so like Sherry, you and I have similar platforms. We're both writers and speakers. And I think when we're comparing with people who do what we do, the temptation to compare is even stronger, right? Because we want to go look at numbers and statistics and things like that give us tangible proof. But what's better is to say, you know what, Sherry and I are both called to do similar things, but not exactly the same thing. For instance, Sherry is called to host a podcast. That's not what God has put on my heart right now. But I am so thankful that I get to be the guest today, right? And how can I be the best possible guest that I can be for Sherry, rather than like, man, I wish I had a podcast. Like, that's just not going to do anybody any good, right? And so just leaning in and recognizing God has not called me to do exactly the same sort of writing and speaking that he's called you to do. We each have our own, like, for instance, I grew up in the church and I'm really comfortable with church people and doing churchy things. And so I feel particularly called to church ladies and people who know the right answer but don't live it, right? And so that's me leaning into who I am and not trying to be someone I'm not, just living out exactly the background and the calling that God has given me.
I love that. That's perfect. Before we wrap up, I would love you to tell my listeners which chapter, while you were writing the book Comparison Girl, which chapter really impacted you the most as you were writing it?
Well, I would have to say it was the chapter on wealth, comparing wealth. Tim Keller says that if we're greedy, we probably don't know that we're greedy. And that was a hard one, because I think I went into that chapter like kind of almost enjoying the idea of writing about it, because I've considered myself a generous person. Like we don't have an extravagant lifestyle. I thought, oh, this is an area I'm going to kind of, free skate for me. No, I was so convicted. Because here are our church fathers warning the first century, Christians who were living under Roman oppression and had no wealth. And they were saying, guard against wealth, guard against greed. And I'm like, okay, if this is the warning for those people, what would God be saying to like a whole generation of American women armed with credit cards, right? And if if we're greedy, we probably don't know that we are. I remember while I was writing that chapter, I was walking on this trail that I often walk on, and it kind of goes behind, it cuts through a neighborhood. And I was thinking, like, I remember when there was only one swimming pool. There's this whole line of houses. And I think I remember it was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, there was only one swimming pool. And now there are like 4 or 5 right next to each other, on this trail. And I was like, wow, that is the impact that we have on each other. And we laugh about it. We laugh about like, oh, I see your cute shoes or your cute handbag, and where'd you get that? And I open my shopping app. Like we're prone to laugh about it. But we're really affecting each other and keeping each other from this opportunity to store our wealth up in heaven. Jesus invites us to put our wealth in the place where moth and rust cannot destroy. And I feel like comparison is keeping us from a lot of opportunities for the life to come. So that was, it was a really convicting chapter for me, but also very inspiring. It inspired me like, I want to do more right now, for that life to come. It was very motivational for me.
That's a good one. I like that. I had never really thought of it, that concept that he was talking to people at that time that we would not consider wealthy.
Not really wealthy, but be on guard against all greed.
Greed.
Like, oh, what did greed look like for them, and what does it look like for me?
That's awesome. So what final encouragement would you like to offer someone in this audience who might be struggling right now with comparison or jealousy?
Yeah. Okay. So if you just want to stop comparing, you're just exhausted by it, and you just want to be done with that, my advice to you is to do what Jesus said. Jesus was always talking about he compared in this upside down way. And he had these pithy little comparison statements like, the first will be last, the last will be first, the greatest is the servant. And all of those statements, the way that I would sum them up are like, stop focusing on yourself and focus on what can I give? Like, instead of looking at the lines on your measuring cup, look at the spout and ask yourself, what do I have to give here? How can I serve someone? Focus on the spout, not the lines. If you want to be free of comparison, that will set you free, because when you're pouring, you're not measuring anymore.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to bless me. I loved hearing this. I love this topic. It's near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it's near and dear to most every woman's heart. So thank you so much. All the links to connect with Shannon are going to be in the show notes, and links for the book. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sherry. It's been a blessing.
Do you want to stop comparing? I sure liked Shannon's approach about how we can learn to compare by example, the upside down method of comparing, when Jesus came to show us how to live, even with comparison, by asking, what can I give? How can I serve? To pour out from our spout and to stop looking at the lies that are within the lines. If you would like to learn more about Shannon and her ministry, along with her books, be sure to read the show notes where you will find all the different ways you connect with Shannon. If you've missed previous episodes, I would encourage you to go back and listen to other great guests. And please listen to episode 105, where I share some background story to this podcast, Your Spiritual Game Plan. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. Like next week, when I talk to Melinda Patrick, we will be discussing how we can not only discover life, but live it well while we wait. If today's episode blessed you and you know a friend who would also gain a blessing, please share it. Also, I would love to hear from you. Are there topics that you would like to hear more about, or guests that you would like to have me bring on? All the different ways that you can connect with me will be in the show notes. You can find me at 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃.com, and I look forward to hearing from you and having you join me for next week's episode.